Hi, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
Today we have a guest on the show, Darren Yee. Welcome, Darren, being
Thank you.
part of Personality Hacker.
It's great to be here.
Yeah. You've been in our community for a while. You've been our profile training student. You've been in our Personality Life Path program, and you've become a friend of ours. And you've done a little bit of work with our company behind the scenes as well to help us with some business aspects. Because your background, I'm not going to steal your thunder. Tell us a little bit about your best fit type. Tell us about what you do for a living.
Yeah.
A little bit, just give us a snapshot of your life, and we'll get into some things today.
Absolutely. So my name is Darren. I have INTP preferences. I went to school for mechanical engineering, but I spent all my time doing musical theater and running projects in school, engineering competitions, things like that. I started a company right out of college, construction tech software company, and ultimately went on to run operations at a few other startups across a number of different industries, mental health, real estate tech, online education. And now I am in venture capital and I invest in startups.
Wow. So as an INTP with INTP preferences, you've had to figure out ways to navigate the business world, which is mostly dominated by people that have extroverted thinking, a lot of extroverted feeling. There's a lot of people that are extroverted judging types, like EJ types, right?
Mhm.
IJs as well. It's very structured, organized. And as an INTP, we have a lot of INTPs that listen and watch the show. Yeah. It could be a challenge to be in that environment because things just don't make sense to the way you think are wired.
Well, that's also assumption we're making. Is that your experience?
It very much is my experience. Yeah. I think INTPs come with this feeling that everyone is irrational and kind of dumb. And that's continued to be my experience.
Yeah.
But in the business world, they act irrationally in a consistent way.
Yeah.
And you can actually learn that style of thinking, and you can learn it as a skill on how to interact with people in the business world, and also, in the social world. But the business world is it's closer, and there's a logic to sort of TE methods of getting things done and organizing that you can figure out.
Yeah. So we're gonna talk to you today because you are an INTP, and so I want to talk a lot about introverted thinking, accuracy. We nicknamed it here in Personality Hacker. That I think the accuracy or introverted thinking users will resonate with, but also I think we could also extend this in a principled way to also the FPs, the people who use authenticity or introverted feeling. And it's not the exact same experience, but anyone that has an introverted judging function, right, that's going into the business world, which is very extrovertedly set up, like it's got a lot of structure to it. I think we have unique challenges in moving through that space. So I think some of the principles we could talk about today, I think would apply to anyone, either whether it's TI or FI, accuracy or authenticity. I think it will apply, but let's specifically stick with an NTP, INTP, and specifically going into the business world. What are some of the early mistakes you made? Like, just paint a picture, like, so someone can kind of find the resonance. Like, they could find themselves in like, yep, I'm an INTP. I made that same mistake. Yep, I get what you're talking about, Darren.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of idealism up front about organizing people.
Okay.
And in the early days of taking leadership roles, I was lucky that it was in the theater setting where the results were more nebulous, and we weren't paying people kind of on a volunteer basis. So I got to make a lot of mistakes in this safe environment. And I had a lot of idealism about how people would behave. I assumed a lot of people would behave similar to me. And sort of over time, doing many of these cycles, start, beginning, and end, and kind of looking back to see what worked and what didn't. A lot of it had to do with leadership ability and leadership skill. And I think for TI, there's some idealism about, if I know the truth and if I just speak truth, people will fall in line. What I've learned is that leadership is a real skill, and you need to learn leadership as a skill to kind of pull everyone in the same direction if you want to get something done at a certain time and on the same vision.
Yeah. Antonia, do you, from your standpoint also, because you're an ENTP with ENTP preferences, do you have a sense from the accuracy or introverted thinking of like early mistakes you made working in business environments? Do you resonate with what Darren's saying?
Yeah, I think what I tried to do is make being a perceiver a feature, not a bug.
Yeah.
There was a lot of, it was very difficult for me to do or to understand why the systems that I was engaged in whenever I was working for, because I worked for all the way from startups to really big companies. And before we started our own company, And there's there's a reason why all of these systems are set up, but some of them are legacy systems, some of them are old, some of them have had their day, but we keep that, like, the companies continue to do them. And at the time I didn't understand why something that didn't seem to have any facility was, continued. Like, there was this belief that it needed to continue to be implemented, and I'm like, well, we can ameliorate all this, we can make them better. But I don't think I understood how difficult it is to change direction of a large ship, right? Like, there's
Yeah.
some companies are tugboats and schooners, and some are barges.
Yeah.
And so I think when I was younger, it didn't make any sense to me why it's like, why do we keep copying and pasting this piece of information into this field? That doesn't make any sense to me. Like, this is an old thing. But it's because it's tied to another system, which is tied to another system. And those systems are important. And they just never, they never cleaned it up. Technologies continue to improve and systems continue to improve, but sometimes you just have to make peace with, well, I guess we put up our electrical wiring before they were burying them in the ground. So I guess we just have to live with the fact that the electrical wiring is outside of the ground, right?
Yeah.
And to do the work of burying them in the ground, metaphorically, right, is an extraordinary lift, and it's just not leveraged to do that at this time. So
Yeah.
I think one of the early mistakes I made was not understanding why systems couldn't, on a conceptual level, systems are very easy to clean up.
Yeah.
Right? Inside my brain, it's very obvious and easy to see how you can ameliorate things. But in the outside actual reality, where to renew a system or to change it means labor costs, and it means opportunity costs, and it means, like, there's a lot that goes into changing something that I didn't understand early on. And I've gotten a lot more appreciation for it at this time. But what I find so fascinating is that for you, Darren, is I want to grab something you said, which is when you first started implementing, when you talk about being in business, but you were in theater, musical theater, where the metrics weren't as set, things are a little bit more run and gun. What were you doing in that context that made it so that you could learn lessons there that took you into other business contexts?
Yeah. It's a good question. I think the reason theater worked for me is because it was something I could show up to consistently and stick through. And with theater, there's a show date, right? The show's going to go on. The audience is going to show up. The people are going to be there. And my primary role was the director. So what happens on stage, I felt a strong responsibility for. And so I showed up every day because I wanted it to be good.
Yeah.
Right. That day is going to come. And so I think the cycle of that, not just doing it once, but doing it a second time and then getting to iterate. Oh, last time this worked, this did not. Last time I really like how this turned out. I want to do that again.
Yeah.
It gave me a space to sort of try different tactics and then just see over time what worked and what didn't.
But just I have to make a quick comment here, Antonia. I know you're on. Can you hold your thought for a second? Because I have to just say something that, first of all, as an ITP, doing musical theater, like, are we talking like
musical theater,
show tune, like full on, like Roger Hammerstein level? ENFP, ESFP on the max. These kind of theater.
100% original. I didn't write them, but we had writers, we had musical composers, we had producers, we had choreographers.
Is this in New York?
Set design, yeah.
Okay, so first of all, INTP, you don't think of INTPs in this environment, A. And B, even if you do, like, you don't show up this way, Darren. Like, you show up very centered and calm and present. Like, how you're showing up right now is how I know you to show up in every context. So I'm trying to, in my mind's eye, imagine you. Now, you're not up on stage dancing and singing, but you are basically orchestrating all of this. So, and first of all, I think it's also very interesting how you use your harmony process, your fourth 3-year-old function of harmony or extroverted feeling, to kind of set expectations. Like, these people are coming, there's an audience coming. We have to perform because there's people that are depending on us to show up. And so you put yourself in a frame where it made sense and you kind of integrated that, which I thought was wise.
Well, and the goal is to make them happy.
For
a couple hours,
which is really cool.
Yeah.
Feed the need.
The goal is to give them a good experience. Well, I want them to walk away surprised and this was worth my time.
Yeah.
And that's the driver, and that's what got me out of bed every day and got me to show up. I couldn't show up to class, but every rehearsal I was there on time because I'm the one responsible. In fact, I was early and I had to run the rehearsal, and I had to make sure that the actors were having a good time.
Okay.
And I had to make sure that, all of the scripts were getting written on time, and make sure that the rooms were getting booked so we could do our singing practice and all of that. So there was a lot of logistics that I kind of picked up as a side effect of chasing that sort of FE,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to highlight that because I think it's a unique framework for an INTP to come with.
Joel is representing the person in the audience who can't reconcile
Yeah,
these
though
two
he's not an
ideas.
INTP. INTPs would never do musical theater in any capacity. You
That's
get
right.
these comments on YouTube
Yeah.
and other places like, oh God, all
That's
right, here we
fair.
go again.
Yeah. No, I think the first time we talked, you asked if I was an INTJ after saying all of my, I work in startups, and you're like, you're sure not an INTJ? I was
Yeah.
a little bit flattered.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I wish I was an INTJ.
You're like, they get so
Yeah.
much done. They're
Yeah.
so mastermindy.
Yeah.
We all do, don't we?
It would be so much easier.
So except for the INTJs, they're like, no, you don't.
They're like, it's a lot of pain and suffering. Don't be us.
Don't be us. So the direction I was gonna go, or the thing I tagged, was that there are theater companies that do shows over and over and over. But the truth, I mean, it's closer to a project,
Yeah.
right? A play is more like a project that has a completion.
Yes.
And so when you've completed the project, it's not like you don't have to take that into the next project.
Mm-hmm.
In companies, and like as a general rule, there's like a system set up where you sort of have to take it as a through line through everything.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm hearing you say is the advantage is that when you were understanding direction, right, which is what you have to do, it's like a lot of directing traffic in a company as well, particularly when you're the person at the top. You learned direction in something that allowed you to do test iterate,
Yes.
project wise.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say one of my core competencies is project management, which you can apply to any context. And I was able to jump across different, after my startup, which was in construction technology, a very specific industry, I was able to move into different industries because the skills that I learned, during my musical theater time, during my startup, were in this sort of project management, people management, leadership area, which is applicable everywhere. That is needed in any environment.
Yeah.
What I find really interesting is that, we're talking about effectively perceivers. We started out by saying people who have introverted feeling authenticity or introverted thinking accuracy, trying to navigate a very extroverted judging context. But what I hear you saying is that the first time you entered project management and entered this more what one would call maybe a judger space of having to organize and orchestrate all of these things to make something big happen, what I hear you saying is that it was kind of a perceiver environment that you were able to work a bunch of stuff out. Like you were able to do test iterate because when you have one play, I'm sure there's a lot of lessons and learning and people you build relationship with and systems that you have set up that you bring into the next one. But you don't have to. You're not under any obligation necessarily to do that. So it sounds like you worked some of these things out in a more friendly context to your type preferences.
That's correct. And I think the key thing here is I had to create my own context for that to happen. Meaning I was in school, and my parents, the understanding is I'm studying engineering, and I wasn't telling them I'm spending all my time doing music theater, right? But I'm
not going to my engineering classes, but I'm doing my directing.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And so, I was there for school and I got by in school. I passed my classes barely. But that bought me the time and the freedom to kind of pursue my own interests. And it was actually a really big leap of faith because the engineering was supposed to be my career. And I didn't really want to go into musical theater as a career, but it's just what I wanted to do. And it was a leap of faith because I felt like developing skills would be more useful to me in the long run, rather than trying to get through engineering school at the top of the class.
Yeah.
And I was right. At the end of, when we graduated, my valedictorian, who was a mechanical engineer, couldn't find a job, but I had all these skills. And so that's why I was able to go out, start a company and get some traction there and get to places that I wouldn't have otherwise if I'd spent all my time just studying.
Yeah, well, that's what Cal Newport talks about in the book, So Good They Can't Ignore You. He talks about focusing more on career capital, skills that are transferable to many different positions, as opposed to just going a straight line of like your purpose or your, like engineering would have been your purpose at the time.
Right.
But that would have been a straight line. But you chose to do something that was interesting to you to pick up some career capital, some skills.
I think it's important to highlight during that time, I still felt like I was failing. I
Mm.
still felt like I was not doing what, I was placed here to do.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a guilty pleasure, honestly. Showing up to do musical theater was like, ooh, no one is giving me permission, but this is for me. I'm doing this. And
Yeah.
it wasn't until much, much later did I realize what I was really doing.
Yeah. You didn't go with the intention of, oh, I'm going to do this to build skill for leadership and guidance. It was fun and probably a community of people you could connect with around a shared common project, putting on the performance or whatever.
Mhm.
I want to go to, so I think skill building is one thing. I'm going to posit something here that I want to launch into that I've found in my own life as an introverted feeling user. So authenticity, FI. And I'm wondering if this translates also to accuracy or introverted thinking. And I learned this from being a father. So I'm trying to make sure I'm not conflating with being a father but I don't think it's just a father, because I think with our team here at Personality Hacker, the same thing. I noticed that if I want to go work out 3 days a week, I just won't do it. I won't get up out of bed. I get up out of bed and do my work, but I won't get up and early to go do it, or it's such a struggle. But the moment I have to take one of my sons with me to go do it, now it's like I have all the energy in the world to show them this is how we do this. It's once I have responsibility to others or responsibility at all, and I'm the responsible party, it helps me perform better, for
Mhm.
myself. I now need to set the standard. I need to show up because I'm responsible for another. So that means I have to self lead in order to other lead. And I don't I'm couching in a lot of it sounds like leadership terms and father terms, but I think there's something here for perceivers in particular. And I want to see if this translates with both of you as introverted thinking accuracy users. Is if you just go and operate some, ENTJ's system, here's how we do it. Here's all the processes. Just go push the buttons, pull the levers. And you don't really have ownership. You're just running through the motions of a system at work or in a career way. It probably gets boring and not rewarding, and you probably don't. It's hard to keep yourself accountable to it. But the moment you take and put the responsibility on your shoulders of this is my sovereign domain now, I am responsible for delivering. It's like you can work in that way. It's like you can now work in that environment by taking that. I mean, we talk about ownership and stuff, but I haven't found the word yet. There's something specific I'm after here that I'm seeing if it resonates with you to speak to.
Yeah.
It's not just responsibility or leadership like you hear people talk about, radical ownership or just take ownership of your product. It's around that, but there's something else it's very internal. Do you have a sense of what I'm talking about, either of you?
I do. I think sovereignty is a good word for it. I think there's a feeling of what can I uniquely provide that no one else is.
Yeah.
Part of my first foray into leadership was showing up to an information session for student council in high school and realizing these people don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that gave me the courage, without any prior experience, to run for student council. And the reason I did that was because I could figure things out that clearly everyone else were just kind of running circles around.
Yeah.
So I felt a responsibility, but it also allowed me to kind of own the solution there.
Yes.
And that's what allowed me to step out of my comfort zone and do something like that.
And maybe I'm speaking to responsibility for others in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I think maybe that's what I'm saying. I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
What I'm hearing you say is that if it's just for me, there's a lot of just for me things that I want to do.
Yeah.
Right? There's no limit to the things that I'd like to, the skills I'd like to develop and the things I'd like to do for myself. But once it's tied to a responsibility to other people, I can feel my extroverted feeling or my harmony not wanting to disappoint. And so it amps up the weight of the task or the project or
Yes.
the assignment.
And I can see millennials trying to do this, younger people trying to do this for themselves, try to tie it to some social accountability,
Mhm.
responsibility. I think I cut you off. Sorry. They're trying. I think this is it's in us. We know this is what works, but we don't know how to maybe do it.
Yeah, well, and I think for you and I, because our extroverted judging function is our 10-year-old or tertiary function, there's a part of us that wants to be approved of by
Yeah.
showing up for others.
Yeah.
I think when it's your inferior or fourth function, your 3-year-old in the car model, I think it's still you're expressing something to yourself about yourself. Can I show up for other people?
Mhm.
Am I the kind of person who will take responsibility or take this seriously? Can I be a professional and do things in behalf of others, even if there's some uncertainty there? you're still making a statement back to yourself of the kind of person you are. And so does that track?
Yeah, I think for the inferior, for me actually, I think it's more of what is my place in society,
Oh, yeah.
and accessing a place in society through, a thinker lens. It's really hard. I don't know where I belong.
Hmm.
I don't know if I'm supposed to be a caretaker, or what do I do with this TI thing that just kind of slings truth and seems to hurt people left and right.
Yeah.
Is there a place for it? And so things like organization and leadership, it's a way for me to understand exactly what my role is, and translate that uncertainty into a tangible result.
Yeah, absolutely. And so uh, when we talk about being a perceiver in a world that requires a lot of structure, to go back to, I don't want to
Oh no.
derail, but to go back to the original, sort of the point of origin, it almost sounds like there might be certain things you can set up to set yourself up for success. The first one I heard you say was put yourself in a position where maybe you're able to do some test iterate, even in a leadership or directorial position, like project management. Specifically for you, was it? And projects are great.
Yeah.
Every time I've done a project, I've learned so much and it has a conclusion. And so I can take the lessons and then apply them wherever I want to.
Measurable results.
Mhm.
They look great on resumes and CVs.
Projects do. Projects look fantastic on CVs, but it's more like, as opposed to just plugging yourself into a system and going, this is the rest of my life.
Mhm.
It's like, maybe take it in chunks and give yourself the freedom to do some test iterate, and then take those lessons and apply them to something that may be more, sort of more steady or more permanent, quote
Yeah.
unquote.
Yeah. I also want to go back to what you said before with your experience. I think one thing that TI users get caught in is, if I build it, they will come,
Hmm.
Hmm.
or I see the flaw in the system, so I'm just going to build the solution and it's going to magically implement itself.
Hmm.
The better mousetrap concept. Like,
Right, right. The flip side of that, what we're talking about here, is instead of starting with what do I think, it's looking at the outer system and asking what do they need,
Hmm.
or how can I be helpful.
Right.
And so it's not starting from a, you know, if I build it, then I get all the credit, but it's just an egoless almost. How can I help this? Is already happening?
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah.
And that's the second thing. So the first one is test iterate and give yourself permission to 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 be in a context that allows you to pick up skills or make mistakes or figure things out. And then the second one is uh, allow the leverage that having a lower extroverted judging function, like either extroverted feeling harmony or extroverted thinking effectiveness, whether it's in the 10-year-old tertiary or the 3-year-old inferior position, there's a lot of there's almost like uncertainty that lives in those functions for us, and we might be able to leverage that, like that question of like, what is my place in society and what do I have to offer? Or, like, I don't want anybody to be disappointed, so I have to show up. It's like, leverage that part of who we are,
Yeah.
as opposed to resenting a world that requires that of us,
Mhm.
right? And going like,
Yeah.
why does the world have to be so judger, and why does it have to run on all these systems, and where's the place for perceiver? It's like, well, there is a place in there. And instead of resenting those systems set up, leverage the fact that that isn't our strength. We don't just have an assumption of competence and capability. Leverage that little bit of insecurity to
Yeah.
to put like like an onus on ourselves. Does
Yeah.
that track, by the way?
Absolutely. I think we don't know what we don't know about extroverted functions. And so what I'm hearing you say is, if you put yourself in a situation where you kind of utilize that uncertainty to at least just keep showing up,
Hmm.
that through that you're going to learn what does the extroverted function world have to teach me. But
Right.
I'm not going to commit myself to it for that reason. When I commit myself to it, it's kind of almost an any leap of faith of, I'm just going to do this, whatever. Musical theater sounds fun. But what keeps me going is the FE of it, and then the lessons I learn are in TE and
Yeah.
FE.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So instead of resenting that the world is set up this way, ask yourself, what lessons does it have to teach me?
Have humility about it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. So that was the second. The second point was like, leverage the uncertainty that lives there.
Yeah. And then I think skill building is a derivative of that. It comes from it. Or you have these skills you develop in an environment like that. And I think that key piece of responsibility, again, maybe I'm overvaluing that responsibility piece over others, especially. I don't know. Could be how I'm wired. I could be overvaluing my experience in it or your experience in it. But I want to ask you about, you're in a unique role at the age of you're kind of like the older brother now. for a lot of maybe younger people that are founding companies, coming out of business school, wanting to start their careers. I'm guessing you find, I'm assuming this, but you find yourself in kind of an advisory, advice giving, like older brother kind of role to people.
For the first time, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now you're like mentoring in a way.
Yeah.
And you're probably getting, because you're in venture capital, you're seeing a lot of very highly motivated, eager mavericks come out of, you know, New York University or different New York schools, wherever, like New York, and the Wall Street's right there. There's a bunch of money right sitting beside them.
Mhm.
And your job is to help, you know, make these things meet, right? Get
Yes.
funding and make Wall Street match the idea.
Mhm.
So you're looking at founders, you're looking at people that are excited and enthusiastic as young people. What is the, like, if you could speak to people just a little bit younger than you in their 20s now that are really moving in their career, what do you see as either the skill, the attunement? Is it about skill? Is it more about attunement? Is it about, like, I don't think it's about professionalism. You work at Wall Street, everybody's wearing suits and stuff. It's like this real polished place. So it's
Mhm.
maybe different than the West Coast Silicon Valley vibe.
Yeah.
Speak to that. Like, how do you see younger people? What are your thoughts around them? What would you wish they would come with differently? How would you advise somebody listening or watching right now that's going to embark in their career? They would love to talk to somebody like you that could help get them started. Like, what would you say to them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've only been in this position for about a year, but I've done several hundred individual coaching sessions with students who want to start companies.
Sure.
And I think one of the biggest blind spots for specifically students who want to become entrepreneurs is moving out of this student mindset where if I follow the rules and if I follow the frameworks and I get an A+ in class, it's going to spell success for me. Entrepreneurship does not work that way.
Yeah.
The real world's markets and the business world does not work that way. It's competitive. This is a really big reframe for a lot of our students, and which is actually why our graduate students do a lot better, because they've had a little bit of work experience, whereas undergrads kind of have this idealized vision of what the world is, and they've basically grown up in a bubble in this private university, and they're projecting their idealism on what the world should be, and that shows up in their business ideas.
Can I just stop you there for a second and say, I don't know, you're saying that's not how the business world works, but before Elon Musk bought Twitter and changed it to X, I remember watching a video of this woman who was at her job. I think it's pretty viral. A lot of people saw it. She was walking around and showing, like, and here's the cafeteria. Now I'm going to go have
Twitter. She worked at Twitter.
She worked at Twitter, and it was like being in college. It was like, I'm going to have coffee, like these really expensive cafe here. And
that's all subsidized.
And it was like, I was like, when's the work happen? Like, you're meeting a lot and having a lot of coffees and socializing, and you're getting paid a salary for that. So, I mean, are you right? That sounds like what tech companies and what big companies are now. They're just a pipeline from school. It's just a duplication of maybe the college life at Twitter, for example.
Oh, that's exactly it. I mean, I would hesitate to call Twitter, Facebook startups anymore, right? They're institutions.
Of course.
They're an extension of higher institution.
Okay.
So much so that, higher institutions are a pipeline into those and then the consulting companies. Entrepreneurship, it's just you. It's just one person, an idea, and you have to go out and you have to make a living and you have to go out and build a team and make an impact on the world.
Yeah.
And that's a very different world than working at a big tech startup.
Yeah. Meaning you're not going to have all the, I think a lot of young people are surprised that they don't have the salary. I mean, probably people by the time they get to know that's not going to happen, right? They know they've got to hustle and make it work when they're trying to make something happen like that, right? Or they think, I get this funding, I get like $100,000 a year salary, and I just start to coast into my new career. Is that the dream? Is that what people come with expectations, or is that not how they show up?
That's the big misconception. Is if I have this big idea that's perfect enough, and if I'm charismatic enough, and I meet with a venture capitalist and I make them fall in love with me through my energy, they're just going to start throwing money at me.
Yeah.
And then I'm Elon Musk. That's that's the story that has been told, and that's what many of them believe in. But that is not reality. Even in venture capital, you still have to go out and prove that you understand your market and that you can prove that if you build this company, people will pay for it, which is really the prime directive of business, is getting people to part with dollars. It's not just giving people things or providing services, for free. It's actually getting someone to purchase something.
Yeah.
And this moment of purchase, it's an unintuitive moment that I think a lot of, especially TI users, idealize. People will part with dollars if I solve their problems. That's not true. You have to understand the emotions behind when people make purchases. So the core of any good business idea is solving a true problem, even if the customers don't see it as a problem.
Yeah.
And it's not just about throwing solutions at them and asking them, what do you want in your life? It's about really truly understanding a problem in a way that nobody else has seen before, and then uniquely providing a solution for it.
Yeah.
How would you, from a venture side, talk about something very ethereal like what we do here at Personality Hacker? You've been through our programs. Like, how do you even, how would you articulate the value proposition in something like that?
Yeah.
Like from your, like, how would you translate as a person in your role?
I think there's so it's important to distinguish between a services-based business, which I think Personality Hacker is, and a scalable startup, which is I build either a product or a software service that can scale. And
we're more boutique. We don't have that scalability.
Right. Yeah. So that's an important distinction. And I think not enough young people consider that as a viable path for their career. Everyone thinks they have to build the big scalable tech company. They have to raise money in order to actually be an entrepreneur. It's not true. You can provide services, do very well for yourself, live a very happy life, or you can open a small business and do the same thing. There are a lot of opportunities out there for young people to get into entrepreneurship that aren't what the main narrative is.
Yeah.
So we're speaking about entrepreneurship as if it's an obvious beneficial path to go down. But I think with gig culture and people hustling and having to have all of these different
jobs,
like and I think a lot of people who think about entrepreneurship think about it in like solopreneurship. You know, like I'm gonna do this thing right by myself. I'm gonna I don't know. There's a lot of different
influencer is one of
solopreneur.
them, right?
That,
Like being an influencer is kind of a solopreneur.
right.
I'm the one guy doing the thing or the one person doing the thing. And like,
Yeah.
maybe I'll have a few people helping be, but it's like really, that's about as big as it's ever going to be.
So there's usually like this story arc of like idealizing something like that and then trying to do it for a while. And it's very hard and it's very grueling and taxing and they don't get a return on investment. And they still, you know, they find themselves still where they were, not any further along, not manifesting their hopes. And then they get soured on this idea that they've, you know, entrepreneurship that they've conflated with gig work or with being a solopreneur or with being an influencer. Can you first create a little distinction between entrepreneurship and all of those idealized concepts? And then part B would be, what is the advantage to actually being an entrepreneur?
That's a great question.
Let's start with the distinction first.
Let's do the distinction.
Because Antonia, to that point, you weren't there, but we were talking out here earlier, and he said building a business is one of the best things you can do for personal growth. So we're going to revisit that in a moment. That's basically what you're asking about.
That's where I'd like to head.
But let's just make a distinction between when we say entrepreneurship and gig work. Those aren't the same thing, but some people conflate them, right? To your point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a bigger story around becoming an influencer and building an audience than monetizing an audience. This is a new business model that we've seen explode during the pandemic, and I think is top of mind for a lot of Gen Z.
Yeah.
Because they consume a lot of what those influencers are producing, and those are the role models. So I think the difference between that and entrepreneurship is, you know, gig work, it's piecemeal, it's responsive. And what I'd say is entrepreneurship, it's more about sort of building the systems to kind of help more people than just one at a time who are coming to you.
Yeah.
It's still entrepreneurial. You still learn a lot about payroll and taxes and trying to make your own way. I think the way that I'm describing it is more around company building, and there's always a point at which the solopreneur things get untenable, and there's too many things to do. You're expected to wear too many hats, so you're forced to bring in help. And I think that's the threshold of when you get into organization building, and more of the entrepreneurship advice out there will be helpful.
Yeah. I almost imagine it like the sun is shining. There's all this energy, and an entrepreneur comes in and says, I have a lens, and everybody help me hold this lens. We're going to focus this sunlight to a pinpoint to create heat and focus and value, like create energy from this in some way. So it's like setting up a system that didn't exist before that can channel energy in a particular way to derive value in a two-way exchange. So like money value to back to the entrepreneur and the energy, the entity, and then value to the end user solving a problem, like you said. Like that value chain of like organized value to deliver for the person and have the reciprocal. And if it's sustainable and it didn't exist before, that's an amazing feat. Like what an amazing thing you created out of the world. Like you took all these components and you put it together and created that. I think entrepreneurs get a really bad rap, all the time, but that's a big service for humanity.
Yeah.
Like that's what builds civilization at the base of it all, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a way of consistently meeting people's needs.
Yeah.
And it gets sort of bastardized a lot, but the reason things are cheap in a capitalist world is because people built systems to make them cheap. Another word for cheap is accessible.
Yeah. Efficient, accessible, all that.
Yeah. Well, I see it as the difference between like when there's a fire, having to go down to the river and grab buckets of water and throwing it on the fire versus creating the system of the fire hydrant
Mhm.
where it's always available in case of an emergency.
Right.
Like that whole system, we don't even think about it anymore because it's available all the time. And but I mean, how many fires were there before fire hydrants were built that like devastated cities and like a person's entire life existence was like literally up in flames. And this is like pre-insurance. So everything you ever had is like gone. And so when a person builds like a really solid entrepreneurial endeavor, they're building things like fire hydrant systems where people like it beautifies a person's life. It gives mass value and it becomes a part of the ecosystem where you're not even thinking about it anymore. It's just a part of life now. And I think those are the most sustainable entrepreneurial endeavors where what they give is so valuable. It just, I mean, of course, there's always problems that come along with it too, or not always, but frequently. I think about like the smartphone. It is incredible how we went from not having smartphones to having smartphones and getting used to them as a fixture of our lives. I mean, I would say it was a matter of months where like everybody had one and it was just a thing and we just have them now. And they facilitated so much in our life. And that is an extraordinary entrepreneurial endeavor to be able to create that mass, just, distribute it, make it so that people all over the world have access to now internet. There's entire villages that are moving their towns further away from rivers and higher up in mountains so they can get better signal, right? Because it's so valuable to them. Yep. And these are like it's like a quote unquote fire hydrant system for the world. And so when I think of solopreneur and gig work, I think of, like you said, hustling one-to-one, trying to make something happen, trying to have a value exchange with a single person. When you go into entrepreneurship in a way of building systems, now you're trying to take what you can do for one person, scale it, and make it so that it's as beneficial as possible for as many people as possible.
That's right. And in specifically tech entrepreneurship, there's a saying, the future is here, just not evenly distributed. So the technology exists, but someone has to do the work. Someone has to be the industrialist to bring it to the masses and to package it in a way that is available to everyone.
This is something like Steve Jobs was really good at, right? That was his genius, I think, in not really even inventing it. It was more packaging. He knew how to package.
Right.
I'd always be like, it seems so basic what he's selling. Like it seems not that he makes it seem like this amazing thing, but it's kind of, but he made it feel more epic than it needed to, and people bought in on it. And I think sometimes we can overthink stuff, and I don't think he did. I think he kept it simple too.
Yeah.
All right. Enough with that.
Sorry,
let's go back to
our NE is going all.
But let's come back to this. You told me.
Yeah.
It was last night. You told me. You said, I think, and this is for an INTP to say this. We're gonna have somebody right now that's INTP going, what? Like it's blowing their mind. You'd say something like that, but you said it's like one of the best personal growth activities you could do is go found a company, go start a business, go become an entrepreneur and create value in the world. And it's going to grow you as a person faster than anything else. A lot of people get very turned off by that idea. Talk more about that. Like from an INTP standpoint in particular, wouldn't it be better to go study formal logic and work on your math skills and your logic and your debate and your refining your thoughts and all of that? Why would you say, even to INTPs or INFPs or anybody that doesn't have, that's not the TE extroverted thinking effectiveness user, really? That's personal growth? I mean, I'm being devil's advocate. I'm amping it up. I agree with you, but I'm amping it up, teeing you up to talk about it.
Absolutely. I think INTPs have a propensity to think that if I solve it in my head, it's solved in the real world.
Yeah.
And that kind of creates a lot of excuses to not get out into the world and to test our ideas. And because they're perfect in our heads, we worked really hard on them. Entrepreneurship for INTPs and also for other types it kind of forces you to contend with all of the richness of reality immediately. So if you think you have a world-changing idea, prove it. Don't just write a blog about it, but go out and try to generate dollars and get people to come around you and say, I want this change in the world, and I'm going to join you and provide my skills and my career to help you bring this to the world. What I see a lot in entrepreneurs is whatever the blind spot that they have in their personal life, for whatever their type is, or you can use any system really, that just manifests in their business. So the business in the beginning, it's really just an extension of the self.
Yeah.
A true organization is selfless. It accounts for the different types of people, and it can do all the things it needs to do without being held back by one person with all the power, who is the founder. And so particularly, and I work mostly with people in their early 20s. They're kind of at a stage where they're figuring out, what is my contribution in the world? What is the mark I'm going to leave on the world? And they want to make a beeline for it through entrepreneurship, not knowing there's all of this inner work to do to even get to the first step.
I had a friend that worked at GitHub, and it was a growing company out in California, and I guess they went public, and he expressed to me that the founder CEO had a lot of pressure put on him, and he was really, I don't know if it was unwilling, incapable, it was just distasteful, maybe just needed to catch up. But it was hard for him to make the switch from being kind of that startup. We're running and gunning, we're building product, we're shipping quick, it's a flat organization with no hierarchy, and he needed to put some hierarchy in and needed to bring some structure and some more, more timed meetings, and, put all the proper things in place that a bigger business has when it scales, when you go public and all that. And it was causing a lot of challenge, because that's when you're at that role, you have to learn so fast in uncharted territory. Because often if you're an entrepreneur and you're developing something, you're creating something that hasn't necessarily been created before, or at least doing it in a way that hasn't been done before, right? Mm-hmm. Like our Airbnb, let's say, they're creating something that's like using people's houses as inventory for places to stay. It's like a really new idea. So you're in uncharted territory. You don't know the tax laws. I mean, crypto's here now with a lot of crypto companies. Like, you have no idea what's going to be regulated, what you're allowed to do. So you're inventing it as you go. And then you also have to kind of invent yourself as you go, is what I hear you saying. This internal invention of self.
Yes. And also, I think you touch on a key point. The second you have employees, you're responsible for paying their rent, making sure they eat that month. So just having enough money in the door for your employees is a tremendous amount of pressure, let alone figuring out the business and how it's going to scale.
Yeah.
The pressure only continues to grow. So there's a real time component here. You can't push this off. You have to figure this out in the business, which again is a corollary to whatever your blind spot is in the person, if you want to feed your employees.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to become a certain kind of person.
Yeah.
Right? That's what I'm hearing, is like, it asks a lot of you all the way through, including things that you have to be responsible to. Yes. If you do it well, if you do it right.
And now I'm going to play devil's advocate. I'm going to be the young person going, that's BS. Putting yourself under that much stress and trauma for what? For money, for wealth, for success. That's not what life's about. Life's about love and care and people. Let's do collective action. Let's not try to do that. That's like, all you're doing is you're playing the capitalist game that's set up, and you're going to basically be miserable and unhappy and stressed out and probably fail at the end of it anyway. So why put yourself through all that? There's a lot better, more healthy ways to grow, someone might say.
Yeah.
What would you say to that?
I agree with that. All of my friends who did they're on Forbes 30 under 30, they've raised the millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, and on the cover of all of these magazines, they're the least happy people I know. And it's unsustainable.
Their internal systems are unsustainable. The wealth might keep going, but they're going to fall apart, is what you're saying.
It's both. It's they're wildly unhappy, and their employees are unhappy. But also, I think there's a misconception that if you, and I'm talking about venture capital specifically, if you raise a lot of money, or if you're doing a lot of top line revenue, that the founders are rich, that the founder gets to keep a lot of that. It's not that common that that's the case. Most companies, even if they have a healthy cash flow, the founders are sacrificing their pay for some future big exit or something like that. And they don't actually have any personal riches. So if your motivation is just chasing money or fame or status, very quickly that illusion will disappear.
Yes.
So then what's the reconciliation between using entrepreneurship for personal development and then also knowing that people who have gotten wildly successful in this space aren't necessarily happy? They haven't necessarily used it for growth.
I think it's a journey that, in my opinion, most people should move through. I think you should have that motivation. I think you should want to make the millions and be on the cover of Forbes, and then go through the journey and the heartbreak of either achieving that and finding it's empty, or failing enough times to realize it's not a worthwhile endeavor. And that journey will bring you into a place of, I'm more calibrated and I know what scale I want to operate at for my life.
Well,
Yeah.
there's this theme of making this real. You talk about INTPs. Let's just talk about INTPs for a second. Having things in their head theoretically, but then going and bearing it out in the real world is such a valuable thing for them. And I see you saying, we'll take the same concept writ large. Even if you get to the end of the company and you're like, this was not satisfying, it's all theory until you have that moment, that experience of it.
That's
Like
correct.
you can never replace experience, no matter how many advice, no matter how much advice you listen to, no matter how many people tell you something. If you're wired that way and that's what you think you want, and then you get to the end of it and it's either not satisfying or you do have some success, but you had to really grow as a person, you had to go through it.
Entrepreneurship is one of those things where you get into it because you want something. You're probably at the end not going to get what you want, but it'll give you what you need.
Yeah.
It makes me think of people who have an idealistic idea of relationships. It's like,
Mm.
yeah, you kind of have to go through. You bring your idealism into relationships, and it will, like, reality will calibrate you around
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Yeah. So it kind of sounds like love, but
Mm.
in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say it's a similar energy.
What would you say is, I mean, just loosely, I'm sure you don't have the numbers, but like what personality types have a tendency to be attracted to entrepreneurship? Is it the ones that you would predict?
This is a good question
Oh,
because
yeah.
my answer is going to be disappointing.
Mm.
It's not about type.
Hmm.
Okay.
Type comes afterwards. So those who can make it past the initial gates of entrepreneurship, it's more correlated to things like privilege, things like, can I get out of school with no debt because my parents provided a lot for me, so I'm not saddled with debt, so I can risk more in my entrepreneur life.
Mhm.
Or is my network, that I grew up in and that my parents have, does that set me up for better success? Have I been trained in the business mind since I was a kid?
Mhm.
These are all things that come from privilege, and it's regardless of type.
Yeah.
Um, After that, though, there are very clear distinctions between how different types react to the foundership experience, the first time foundership experience. And I only have a year's worth of data, but I've seen some patterns already. Um, so yeah, I don't want to. Was that answering your
No,
question?
I have like a train I'm going on,
Okay, go.
but I love
Yes.
so that's people who end up, that's are those, or is that demographic breakdown that you're talking about being correlated more to privilege than to type of people who succeed or continue to go the next level, or are we talking about people who are merely attracted to it and seek it?
Mm. It's a good question because I'm at the very earliest stages of venture capital. So I invest in mainly just beyond idea, prototype, first few customers, and then what I've seen is those who make it. It's not really. It doesn't skew toward a specific personality type. It's more about one. Do you have founder market fit? Is you as a person? Do you understand this market and do you have enough? Um, Zeal and enthusiasm about solving this problem to make it through the tough things of scaling.
Yeah.
And then two, it's how well can you create your circumstance and you create your organization to play to your strengths and then to cover your blind spots. That's where I think personality type is a leverage point. It's understanding the self and unlocking all of that potential to get to each next step.
Okay. And so I had a different question, but I want to snatch the thing you dangled, which is you've already seen some patterns in how types respond to that. So do you mind sharing some of your patterns?
Sure. And
Why are you hesitant? This is weird. You're like, well, okay.
I
You're
don't-
like super like
Early.
pulling back.
I don't think I have enough data, so
Oh,
I'll
so
come
it's an
back.
ITP thing.
Yeah, I'll come back in a few years and be like, I was wrong about this. I was wrong, but I have more data now.
You're welcome to do that.
Okay.
You're allowed to update your data.
Sure. So what I've seen, so I'll give you some examples. FE users, and this is
So
going to
Harmony
echo
users.
Harmony users,
That's what I
Yeah.
thought.
Harmony front seat. This is going to echo a lot of common type advice, but I see it play out. One big blind spot for them is I think it comes from a self-worth place, but they are reluctant to price their product or service appropriately,
Hmm.
and they want to give, and the customers are coming to them because they're getting all this free service, this free product, but it's hindering them. It's hindering their team. They can't pay their team enough, and it's a self-worth thing where they have to say, I am worth more than I'm charging, and I'm gonna put my name on this higher price point, and then trust that then that added resource will then make the lives better of everyone on the team, but also themselves.
Yeah.
They very often will try to do everything themselves. And even when they make hires, they tend to either micromanage or will kind of coddle them and not give them enough freedom to really shine, because it's that affiliative, this is all me. They're more often to be solo founders than others who are willing to kind of be co-founders.
Interesting. Yeah, you
Okay.
wouldn't think that.
Yeah.
Any other patterns?
So that's extroverted feeling
Mhm.
harmony users,
Yes.
FJs, Myers-Briggs FJs. What about the FPs of the world, the authenticity, introverted feeling people? How do they typically
Yeah.
show up in this environment?
So the ones, I think they self-filter a lot, which I appreciate about FPs.
Okay.
The ones that I've seen who decide to go into entrepreneurship, they've gone out into an industry following their passions. I'm thinking of one in particular who we invested in recently, who's in the music industry. I think is an INFP. Went in following his, he loves music, and he saw that the system is broken, and he came back and said, I want to change it. And what I found working with him is most traditional startup advice doesn't apply to FI users, because they already kind of know what they want.
Amen.
And
It's hijacked me so much trying to follow traditional advice, and I keep doing it. It's not working. I'm like, I think I must have to do this a different way. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Just it resonated so clearly.
That's well, so that's validation.
Yeah.
Is that it's they should just trust themselves if they think they figured it out. They're also very good at surrounding themselves with smart people and getting people on board with their vision, and kind of through that bringing these skills together, mindset, creating really effective teams.
What's the challenge though?
Yeah, what's their blind
What
spot?
do they struggle with? Their blind spots. I need to know, Darren.
The
What's my blind spot?
I mean, I've got some guesses.
It's really why I'm asking. Oh, I bet you do, Antonia.
it might have to do more with the perceiving functions.
Okay.
But it could be something around expertise and systems. It's integrating this, the backseat function, the TE of it.
Yeah.
There are points at which you do there are points that you don't need to reinvent the wheel every time, and you should just trust an expert or trust the best practices of the industry, and that could be a blind spot.
Mhm.
Yeah. I would guess that people like myself with authenticity, introverted feeling, have a tendency to overcomplicate and overproduce something that could be more simple. Like we want to like look, if it's super interesting and complexity, it like makes it more quality or better, and my ego gets boosted around it. Like the real smart, look how smart I was. I have like meta levels of like complexity here. So it's not just something basic, it's like extra. And I think that's probably the proclivity that I would personally go down, and I would assume a lot of other authenticity users I know would probably have a similar drive or pull.
Yeah, I've worked with an FI user who worked in customer service, and she was incredible at it, but she killed herself calling every single client, making sure every single problem for them was solved.
Yes.
Getting on the phone with them in some third-party software. And it's like, that's useful to a degree, but we also have hundreds of clients.
Yeah.
And sometimes a canned email will do.
Yeah. That over personalization, over specialization of everything in that way. Okay. And then extroverted thinking effectiveness users. I'm guessing, I mean, the assumption is that a TJ comes into the world, the business world, and it's like dropping a fish into a lake.
They're like Boss Baby. They were born in a suit.
Cookies are for closers.
That's
Like
right.
they know how it all works. They're elegant. There's no challenges, maybe some emotional stuff here and there, some backseat introverted feeling. But like, I think the assumption for people that aren't TJs, extroverted thinking, is they have the easiest time in business in the world and they just effortlessly do everything. And the world just is their oyster.
The cartoon understanding of type.
Business just comes to them. They don't have to go to it.
Yeah. So my answer is, I think, counterintuitive, but also, again, I'm going to qualify small sample size. And I work with specifically
of course
students. So either undergrad or graduates who are early career, let's say. Most TE users at that juncture in life will not take the risk. It makes no sense to take that much risk. I was saying before, business school kids are getting multiple six-figure offers out of undergrad.
Yeah.
If you're a TE user, you understand resource, you have all this debt, why would I risk this sure thing and go start a company that has tons of risk for some future thing? More often than not, they take the money because they're good at it. And that kind of puts them on this train directly into that path.
So you're going to find more extroverted thinking TJs in the executive suite as the CFO, the COO, the employee in the second tier in the executive ranks more than the founder themselves.
The system is built for them. The larger business system is built for them. What I will say is those who I have worked with that are TE users, again, it's about integrating that backseat, that inferior. The phrase that comes to mind is, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And I think TE has a propensity to look at people as resource. But if you're building a team and you're asking a lot of your team, they have personal needs, right? They have egos, they have career ambitions, and you have to be in touch with that and kind of do things that are unproductive, like recognize your employees once in a while, buy them lunch, or just these personal things that a lot of TE users very easily shove off.
Yeah. Not because they don't care. They're just focused on resource and the task at hand. And sometimes when I'm in that mode, I have a part of me that's effectiveness, right? My 10-year-old, I can forget people, weirdly enough, as much as I'm a feeler and care about the individual. In that mode, man, we're doing something. Sorry. Eat later, Darren. Eat later. We're in the middle of recording a podcast or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we didn't talk about introverted thinking, TPs.
Well, we kind of talked a little bit about it at the beginning, but
yeah. Well, just to summarize what we've covered already, if I build it, they will come mentality is a big one. That's the big blind spot. It's just not integrating the FE of what do other people want and how can I be helpful, rather than what do I think and how can I force that on the world.
Yeah.
I will say that I think and I don't profile any of these people to know for sure, but it feels like in the business world, there's a lot more introverted thinking accuracy than ever before. Like I would argue, like with crypto, a lot of leadership is accuracy users. I think with any tech startups, there's a lot of this, there's just so much. It feels like the internet is built finally. And like technology companies and the way that like tech works, that business world is built for TI, for accuracy. Like it feels that way to me. The physical world's for extroverted thinking, but the internet space, the blockchain governance system seems very much like a TE system. It doesn't seem TE to me. It does not seem
TI system.
TI system. It feels accuracy to me. TI, introverted thinking system. It's like federated. Everybody's got kind of their own sovereignty. It's all
transparency.
It's public and trackable and transparent, but it also can't be messed with. And like the thing is what it is. The logic sound, like that kind of idea.
Yeah.
It can't be manipulated in the way maybe effectiveness would want to.
Built on complicated algorithms.
Yeah, and math and like all these computations and things. It just, I feel like introverted thinking is going to be more of a player in like the next 100 years than it's ever been before in our world.
There are aspects of that which I agree with. I will say a lot of the narrative around, say, cryptocurrency or more recently AI comes from a TI idealistic place.
Okay.
And I'll give you an example. When cryptocurrency was huge, the promise was this is going to revolutionize every industry. This is going to, become the new standard for every financial tech startup. And here we are a few years later, and the reality is it really hasn't changed a whole lot.
Yeah.
Same with AI. I'll tell you from an investing standpoint, AI is the fad. Um, but actual money going into companies using AI is not as it's not commensurate to the fad,
Mm.
because the venture capital dollars are not asking how cool is the technology. They're asking, have you found a helpful application in the real world?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those that are raising money have used AI or cryptocurrency to solve an already existing problem just better.
Yeah.
So it's not the technology itself. It's you still need to go through that trial by fire of how does this fit into the greater picture? How can I help people with it?
Well, that in the late 1990s, I remember the conversation around the internet was the internet's really cool, but there's no commercial application. It connects people, but what are we building? There's no way to derive value at a fundamental way.
Mhm.
And the question at that point, right before like the bubble crash of 2000, 2001 or whatever, was like, and there were these companies, just pets.com and like all these like .com companies that were raising tons of money and sort of had a kind of a loose business model, but it wasn't actually sustainable. It's kind of like the streaming networks now try to like they're hoping they're going to eventually break even and make money, which they're not as
Yeah.
much, right now. They're having a hard, well, I think Netflix is doing well, but like Disney Plus is just bleeding money like crazy for the entire organization. And so there was this idealism and hope it was going to solve a lot of challenge. So maybe AI is at the place where the internet was in the 90s. It's like, we just don't know how to commercialize it yet, but we know the potentiality is going to be there.
Yeah.
So it's gonna have to go through its like boom and bust cycle, and then the second, it's always the second wave that really builds the applications and the value is derived.
I think that's it. So in the early days of the internet, people were investing in websites because they thought that was going to be the real estate of the future, right?
Yes.
I'm going to buy whatever.com in spades because that's what's going to make me rich. What we learned after all of that is you have to get to the application level. It's not until something like a Facebook, something like a Netflix that provides a real service, just using the internet as a tool to do it better. That's how you get widespread impact, and that's how you create business.
Yeah.
So, I want
Bring
to
it back,
I
Antonia.
want to bring it. I want to
Bring me
that
out of
through
my
line.
business entrepreneur tech startup land back
Yeah.
to reality.
Yeah, because I know you're super into it, so you can talk about it all day long.
I know.
So I want to bring it back to how do perceivers survive in a judger world? Back to entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
So we established one, as a perceiver, find projects where you can test iterate, right? And don't and set yourself up for success that way. Try not to resent that reality is set up in an extroverted judging way, because that's how, that's kind of the point of both of those functions, extroverted feeling and extroverted thinking, is to manage the world and set it up. And knowing that it's not necessarily your playground, try not to resent it, right? That it doesn't have an immediate spot for you, just, that you can plug and play. But you can maybe understand that push-pull relationship you have with those functions is maybe something you can leverage for yourself, maybe something that you can learn something about yourself in this context, as opposed to resenting it. I also heard you say that entrepreneurship is a fantastic personal growth tool, not because it in of itself necessarily changes and grows you and makes you a better person if you succeed, but because it will give you a ton of come to Jesus moments, right? That's what I heard. It was like, you're going to have some of your idealism taken from you, which is a perceiver challenge, regardless of whether or not the person has sensing or intuitive preferences. There is an idealism that comes along with having an introverted judging function, either introverted feeling authenticity or introverted thinking accuracy, because we're working things out inside of our mind where there's no limitation. And so when you say like, well, one of the challenges is that we think if we've solved it in our head as introverted thinking or accuracy users, if we've solved it in our head, we've solved it in reality. And what entrepreneurship does is it, either through success or failure, will teach you a bunch of lessons about meeting reality where it's at, right?
That's correct.
Like, things don't always work out the way that you have imagined them or done the math in your head. And when you meet reality where it's at, it will teach you more about yourself and your place in all of this. I've also heard you talking about there was another point that was really beautifully crystallized in all this conversation about oh gosh, now I've lost the thread. What was the lesson you took? Because that number 4 is slippery.
Well, I would just say, I did write down, I think I've heard it before, but it struck me today, this idea, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I think I have an instinct for the far together, but sometimes it's hard to throttle and run at a pace everyone can go at a pace everyone can kind of be with together.
Mm.
You go far because you're hitting benchmarks as you move forward in a lot of ways. But I think the perceiver proclivity is to just, let me just do it myself. I can go faster and I can get it done more quickly. And letting go of some of that in order to help be more significant. Like there's something here with a perceiver to let that go and be willing to play nice with others in more of an extroverted, organized way. Like we're all structurally in like a system, and the system itself is going to move forward in mass. And when I say in mass, it could be a small group of people,
Right.
like 10 people, but that's much different than me is just, single going forward into something.
Thank you, because I remember the next piece, which was maybe see these opportunities to interface with the outside world as ways to build skill, not necessarily always have to be on some sort of very specific purpose, but maybe give yourself permission to pursue things that are interesting to you to build skill in those things.
Well, and what skill gives you is it gives you a base to pull to be resourceful. Like we talk about like when you're starting something and you're trying to make something happen in the world, whether it's a business or just a project or some social thing, resourcefulness. We're talking about be resourceful, resourcefulness. It's like, what does that mean? Like I think of like resource, like money, wealth, like raw material. But when we talk about resourcefulness, that can also equal skill.
Yeah. Skill gives you, if you develop a few really good skills and you can become better than the average person around you, it gives you the optionality to step into and out of the extroverted judging world.
Yes.
Whereas if you don't really provide a lot of skill, you're kind of swept into this, sit at the desk 9 to 5 or whatever it is. There's a saying that you only need 3 things to survive in a workplace: be liked by others, do good work, and show up on time.
Yeah.
Reality is you can show up you can get away with 2. So if you just do good work, and maybe this is my TI frame, but if you do good work, you can then create space for the other needs that aren't compatible with a typical 9 to 5 world. Meaning if I do my job really well, my boss might not care if I leave early, every once in a while so I can go pick up my dog or whatever it is.
And so I do want to hit on one more thing.
Absolutely.
I don't know if we're about to.
Well, we can wrap up after this. Yeah.
I just want to make sure we had the through line of like, okay, so for those of you perceivers who are watching it, to go tell me how to survive in this extroverted judging world.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to talk about is this idea that you said, well, it's not really based on type, it's based on privilege. So if we're in a system that privileges some people and not others, well, how do you overcome that? How do you fight a system that's set up to, I don't know, it's set up to cause failure for the majority of people?
Let me get more specific. Someone's watching or listening right now going, yeah, Darren, you're right. I don't have privilege, so I shouldn't even try, because you said that's the factor that's going to make it more likely for success than anyone else. So you confirmed to me that I shouldn't even attempt because I don't feel like I've got the same privileges as other people. So I'm just not going to do it. Like you're not saying, speak to that. Or you're not saying that, right?
No. I think what I'm saying is self-awareness if you double down on self-awareness, that's how you can be at the same playing field as those with privilege.
Ooh.
And so if you can play to your own strengths and cover your blind spots, you'll be at the same place that those with privilege use that privilege to do the same thing. They just have the resource to spend to do that. But you can do it on your own with enough work. And if you get to that point, you're actually at an advantage because now you have the momentum of self-growth, which you're going to need. And those with privilege, they're going to hit the wall at some point. It's just going to have a lot more pressure on them, a lot more on the line. And they might, it might be a bigger collapse.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there is something to be said for being scrappy.
Absolutely.
I think we undervalue scrappiness. Like I think we have communicated to people, at least younger generations than myself, that there's a straight line to all of these things. And the way that you get to your results, your end game, the thing you want, is by following all the rules of this straight line. And I mean, I'm a little older, so one of the privileges I have is that I grew up in a time period that wasn't so insistent that everything was a straight line. The system wasn't gobbling humans up and spitting them out if they didn't go in that, straight line as much as it kind of does now. And yet, my path has been very winding. And I got to where I'm at right now, which is, we're we're in a startup, right? I mean, we've been doing personality hacker for the last 10 years.
Can you have a 10-year startup?
Yeah.
Is that possible? To just be in a perpetual
Absolutely.
startup environment?
Yeah, I think
Because it still feels like we're there.
You
really
have the
resisted
mindset.
that.
You can have the mindset for 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really resisted the idea that we were still a startup. But I mean, we were a small company. We've never gotten any funding or any sort of investment. Everything we did was
Bootstrapped up.
yeah, basically. I mean, a little bit of subsidy when we first started out, first started out, but not by any investor. And I just got here because it was like, well, I don't know what else I'm gonna do, so I guess I'm doing this, right? It didn't really feel like an option.
Mm.
And most of where we've gotten has been, I would argue it's more been scrappiness than it's been
Oh yeah.
anything else.
Mhm.
I mean,
Just making it work.
I like to say I grew up in a trailer park because I did.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was my financial heritage. So what I'm hearing you say is that personal growth and understanding of self can give one maybe a little bit of like a courage for scrappiness, a
Mm.
courage to do it outside of the straight line.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's how you create your own path. Is through the personal growth journey, because you're not relying on the external system, and being scrappy is how you find those tests to grow from.
We did a lot of talking because it generated a lot of thoughts, but was there anything that you wanted to say that we did not give you an opportunity to say?
I realize I didn't answer your question, Joel.
Oh.
What is the problem that personality hacker solves?
Oh.
This is actually going to sound kind of like this. I can't believe that this came full circle like this, but in my opinion, and I, like you said, I've been through many of your programs. I think the core problem that personality hacker solves is around this self-awareness and kind of creating a space to explore the self and to have a community that allows you to develop and feel seen in a way that the greater environment does not allow for. Um, and I think that's a much needed thing for especially entrepreneurs, but anybody going through a self growth journey.
Yeah. It made me think in terms of like this idea. I wrote literally down self-awareness brings you up to the same place as someone maybe with privilege. I kind of wrote that down. That spoke to me how you said that as a frame to come from. And made me think in terms of we assume like equality and distribution. We always talk about it in the outer world where there's hard assets and hard resource. And, you know, metaphorically, there's only so much beachfront property. So not everyone can have beachfront property. So how does equity how do we get equality in the world, in the external world, when there's differences and limitations? But we also have an unequal distribution with the self in that some people are more focused on self-awareness and self-growth. And these things are free. Like these aren't resource distribution problems. They're more attunement problems. They're more challenges. What came up for me is we can have, I mean, you know, my idealism says we can have perfect equality in self-awareness because everyone has themselves and everyone has the inner space and terrain to explore. And it costs time and energy, but it doesn't cost external resource for that. It costs willingness, intentionality, focus, humility. And we all have all those resources are available to all of us. Like some people need healing and other things to access them, but they're all there. The raw materials are there. So it really awakened to me this idea of we don't even think about that as a framework to talk about equality and humanity being a little bit more privileged in a way. Like I think that's why it works, right? Self-awareness, because the external privilege that someone might have, there's like internal things that they kind of just got that they may not even know they have inside of themselves. Like not the fearing of like when the resource is going to run out. They can like, they don't have that constant panic. Maybe if they're in a place where they don't have to think about resources much, as maybe someone that's struggling. And so the internal systems are more calm and chill, like their nervous system is calm and chill. But someone can earn that same calm and chill through work and self-awareness that person just gets because of their context, maybe. Is this idea, you both are looking at me like maybe I'm not clear on my idea, but is this resonating? Is this tracking what I'm saying?
Well, I have a thing I would say, but I want to
hear what Darren says.
No, I have another thing.
Oh.
You sparked something for me. Go ahead.
Yeah. When you said it's free, the first thing that popped up is it's not free. It's without financial cost.
Exactly. It's available.
But then you mentioned all the things that do have to go into it. Energy, attunement.
It's as free as a gold mine in my backyard, right? Like,
yes,
I still have to go and dig it out.
Yeah. And I do believe we're on unequal footing there too,
Yes.
because there are people whose lives are complicated,
Yeah.
difficult, start out maybe with a lot of capital T trauma.
Yeah.
Like, we don't all have the same starting point when it comes to that.
I agree to that.
And
Yeah.
we don't, by the way, I'm not going to disagree with you. I'm going to acknowledge that and then also agree, actually. We don't have an equal starting point. And that's why I've started to define personal development as accelerated maturity, because like your starting point, you might be doing personal growth because you're actually less mature than others because of your circumstances, or you might need to catch up, and you've been hitting a glass ceiling and you can't solve your problems because you were actually you look around at your peers, your contemporaries, and they're all further along than you are, and you're trying to figure that out. So there's a lot of things that goes into personal growth and development, but the one thing, I couldn't agree with you more, actually, because no matter what your starting point is, and no matter how resourced you are with time, energy, attunement, and those kinds of things, like, it's hard to go do a Vipassana retreat, even if it's actually literally free. Most
Yeah.
Vipassana retreats, 10-day meditations, they ask for a donation.
Yeah.
It's open to anybody. Like, you got to go be quiet and, eat rice and beans, but it's like, you don't even have to donate if you don't want to. You can go do a 10-day Vipassana retreat for absolutely free in like Vipassana, facilities all over the United States anyway. And I'm assuming that extends to Europe, Australia, and other places.
Yeah.
But who has the 10 days, right? So if you're working 2 jobs and hustling, you got kids, and maybe you're a single parent or whatever, how are we going to go do a 10-day Vipassana retreat, right?
Yeah.
So there are unequal situations, but even a person in that situation can generally find time to go, what is this meditation thing, right? Or like maybe do some stretches and do some yoga and get in touch with the body. There are also people who have different places that they start with mental health, which might have them be self-sabotaging and not pursue those things.
Sure.
And yet it doesn't matter where you start with mental health. You can always improve and get better. Like you can put attunement to improving and continuing. So when we talk about personal development, I think we get this like sort of Santa Monica yoga 30-something-year-old, woman image in our head, drinking $5 bulletproof coffees and $20 smoothies. But it's just really a matter of attuning to the self.
Yeah.
And like you said, when we start to do that, when we start to pour time and resource into this thing that it's not free. Like you have to put time and energy into it, but it is without financial cost.
Yeah.
Opportunity cost sometimes, but without, like, you don't have to pay money for it as a general rule to truly do it. I think it absolutely starts leveling the playing field because, like you said, there are billionaires who have been on the cover of magazines and they're miserable because they're not doing it, even though one could argue. I mean, of course, those people are probably running from meeting to meeting and they don't have time either, right? And so it's like those two people are both hustling and they're both running into the same experience and they're both experiencing the same lack of fulfillment. So if a person chooses to put time and effort and resources into it, I believe it does start to level the playing field. That accelerating of maturity starts to even that privilege gap to some extent. And I think in a very relevant way, in a way that's hard to communicate until you started that process.
Yeah.
Once you start that process, it's like, oh, why didn't I do this before? Why have I been wasting all this time not doing this thing? It's like Brian Regan talks about getting glasses, right? He's like, I bought a pair of glasses, and he's like, why is instantly improved vision not at the top of everybody's list? Like once you put the glasses on, you're like, why did I put this off? That was ridiculous. And I think personal growth or accelerating one's maturity is very similar. So I just want to make that caveat because I could almost hear the person be like, that's not true. There's a lot that goes into personal growth. That's also privileged, but it's actually not. It's actually not. You can start at any point and you can dedicate and donate 10 to 15 minutes a day to doing it. And you will outclass your peers. Just 15 minutes a day focused on doing growth work. You will start to see that privilege gap. If we're defining a successful life as happiness and well-being, you'll start to see that gap leveling out.
Yeah. And then the material things will come as a byproduct of that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What was your thought that you wanted to share?
I don't know why it's coming up, but my thought is, there might be some out there, maybe some of the listeners who think about business and kind of, bucket it in sort of like a Wall Street, Wolf of Wall Street kind of American Psycho I don't want to sell my soul for the sake of money
Yeah.
kind of idea. What I would encourage is that you look at business and entrepreneurship as a tool to scale your impact.
Ooh.
And we need more entrepreneurs out there who aren't the typical Wall Street types, who can wield that power, who can direct that resource in a way that will make better impact in the world.
Yeah.
Those who are doing it now aren't doing a great job. So I really believe in those who aren't typically in the archetype to step up and go through that journey and make an impact on the world.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here this week.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you on the show. And I think a gift to you, like you might not have thought about it, but I think one thing of laying down this podcast is as you update your introverted thinking accuracy, as you mature in your career 5 years from now, you can look back at this and see almost a time capsule of where you were and what your thinking was at a moment. And I think it's something that for all NTPs, you should never fear that. It's like a nice like milestone of seeing the competence you've built over time. Like you reflect back on, and it may be embarrassing. Oh, I wasn't as wise as I am now. I wasn't as intelligent. I didn't have as much data. I maybe said some things that was a little uncalibrated or I wouldn't stand behind today. But I think it's neat because it shows you just like your reference often, I think for introverted thinking accuracy, I've noticed you tend to self-reference the metric. Like how much did I improve? What percentage point did I improve over time? And something like this is a nice conversation to encapsulate some of your thinking in this way in a public forum that I think is valuable.
And this time I'm not wearing a tutu.
You're not wearing a tutu.
That's right.
We did have you on the show before.
But you were in a tutu.
You came to our Gettysburg Live show like a year or so ago, and it was Halloween time.
It was.
You weren't just wearing a tutu for the heck of it. Although that would have been crazy, like awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Listeners, go check out the episode.
It's fun.
I'm a little disappointed that you actually aren't in a tutu this episode.
I know you almost didn't recognize me, right?
I know I didn't. I was like, who's this guy?
Barely.
Yeah.
All right. We should probably close up. This has been a great conversation, but let me kick it over to you. If you've been watching or listening, what's coming up for you? As Darren's talking about this, are you a perceiver that you have a challenge in the judger world, the business world, the extroverted judging setup and all the structure that's there, but you found maybe a way to navigate that, or you've never found a way? We want to hear from you. How do you see this showing up in your life? You've not been able to talk with us. We've had 3 microphones. You're the 4th person in this conversation. We want you to come over and make your voice heard. Come over to personalityhacker.com. Directly below this episode, leave a comment, ask a question, and more importantly, share your story. Stories are atomized experiences. We want to get to know you and what your experience has been. So come over and make your voice heard.
And if you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe to us on iTunes and various Android platforms. If you leave a rating and review for us on iTunes, it helps us out a lot. We also have a video podcast. You might be watching us right now, and you already knew that Darren didn't have a 221, or at least maybe it was below the fold. I don't know. So it was good to confirm. If you are watching this and you enjoyed the episode, you can like, subscribe, and hit the bell to let you know when a new episode comes out. We have a book. It's called Personality Hacker. You can get it in all major book retailers. And if you leave us a rating and review on Amazon or on Goodreads, if you enjoyed the book, that also helps us out a lot. And finally, we have a suite of programs that are designed to help you accelerate your maturity.
Yeah.
Focus on personal development, personal growth. And Darren, what's been your favorite program?
Ooh, I got to say, we just did Personality Life Path. And that really exceeded expectations. That was really something.
Exceeded expectations. That's good news.
Did you already have high expectations or no?
I had sky high expectations because everyone who's been through it told us how good it was. And then I went and exceeded all expectations.
Awesome. I keep saying it's my favorite thing to do. So I concur.
Yeah.
I concur. So when it's the time for Personality Life Path to come around, we open up a new course. We highly recommend you check it out. It exceeds expectations, sky high expectations. I'm quoting you on that one literally right now. I'm quoting you. All right. And so go check it out and see if there is a program, including Personality Life Path, that's right for you.
Yeah. Thank you again, Darren, for being here. We'll do it this way. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
My name is Darren Yee.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker podcast. Hey, it's Joel from Personality Hacker. So a big reason people get into personality types is usually to improve their relationships with other people. And you can understand key differences between you and someone else when you understand how type works. So clearly, personality type is applied to relationships. But what about the relationship with yourself? Well, personality type can also help you navigate your career, or maybe an educational path that you need to follow, or other opportunities that present themselves and it helps you know which are the right choice for you. And ultimately, personality is the key to unlocking identity-level worldview and life purpose. It all starts with getting the owner's manual for your personality type. In this owner's manual, we cover the basics of your personality. And then we dive a layer deeper to connect your personality to your relationships, your career, your worldview, and identity. Because we believe it's your life, and it should be designed for your personality. So start your owner's manual journey at personalityhacker.com. When you access your owner's manual, I recommend focusing on the ideal day exercise first. Because when you start crafting your ideal day, you're being mindful about the type of lifestyle that you want. So designing a life around how you're naturally wired makes sense, and you can finally stop fighting yourself. So come discover and develop your unique personality at personalityhacker.com.